Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome. So we had an issue trying to record the webinar last night. Somewhere deep in the Zoom settings, we're not enabled. So I am re-recording this, and you're going to get a super speedy, fun version where I will kind of walk you through the deck as we did last night. And then also answer all the questions that came through in chat and Q&A. And so it'll be a little faster than we ran that particular session, but hopefully still chock full of value. Also want to mention that I'll share all the links that are mentioned here in the deck. We'll share the deck with you all as well. And if you have any questions, of course, you can feel free to send a note in the DMs or via email. We'll include that information as well. So yeah, let's dig right in. And then also want to mention really quickly before we start too, we'll be sharing some info about the 8 Weeks to Employed Bootcamp. If you haven't seen this before, I'll talk a little bit more about this model and how it works and how it functions and what you can get out of it at the very end of the webinar. But I just wanted to mention it right off the top. If you are looking to accelerate your search as a job seeker, if you are leveling up and you just want to really move forward in the process and move faster, if you just want to kind of be ready, if you're in a workplace where you're not sure it's the right place for you anymore, this is something that can be really, really helpful. We've run this 2-3 times a year for a while now, and it's quite useful. So let's dig into the webinar, how to recession-proof your job search in 2022. A lot of the stuff in this deck is sort of hands-on knowledge that we've learned in the community over the last 2 to 3 years as we're all watching the pandemic and other things take place. And then some of it, we've also kind of gone back and refreshed some of the expertise and knowledge based on kind of the economic situation right now. And so there's some suggestions and recommendations, tips, templates, etc. So here's what we're going to go through. I'll just do a very brief version of the introductions. And then we'll also kind of go through each particular strategy. So they're all listed here. And there won't be time for Q&A, but I'll kind of wrap it up with some of the, I'll mention throughout some of the things that came up last night. And then at the end, I'll wrap it up with a few extra kind of little Q&A bits based on the questions that folks asked. So let's dig right in. All right, if you are watching this webinar or you're attending any kind of Albert's List event, you probably know about Albert's List already. It's a job search community with 47,000 plus folks in it. I've been part of it since 2014. Actually, Albert and I go quite a ways back, and I've been a moderator in the community for a couple of years, but just a fan and kind of part of it and participating for quite some time. And it's just really about providing community around the job search and the job career development support process. So they're not here at the moment because I had to mess up and re-record this, but Alyssa Ballstrand's another of our moderators. Elisa Huang is a moderator as well. She'll be leading the bootcamp that I mentioned in September, along with myself. And I'm a moderator for Albert's List. And I'm also the founder of the Early Manager, which is a coaching business that I run. After having marketing tech startup career for quite a few years, I now work with new managers, coaching them on all the processes of building a team that's high performing. So let's dig right in. Strategy number 1, highlighting recession-proof skills. This is something that's actually quite useful, and I think this is definitely a high value tip for folks. So let's talk about kind of a couple of examples. The first one's data. So working with data is something that you can really highlight and that will kind of put you at the forefront of how you apply, how you interview, how you position yourself, how you do networking, whatever it might be. And that's because tell me about a business that doesn't have data as a core part of it, right? I kind of, put that phrase tech enabled here to name a business that's not tech enabled. There's very, very few that are enabled by some type of tech. And if it's got tech, it's got data. And, there are different kinds of data experience and expertise, right? You've got data gathering and collection, formatting, hygiene. So, even if you don't have a traditional background, education, experience, certifications in, data analysis or being a data scientist or whatever it might be, maybe you've run surveys. Maybe you are the person in your org that everybody looks to help kind of clean up data in spreadsheets and format it and structure it. Maybe you just taught yourself SQL because you are like that stuff, right? If you have some skills in those realms, certainly helpful. Also presentation, analysis, strategy, right? What does the data mean? Trends, insights, things like that can be really helpful. And odds are that you probably do have some of this expertise. So here's an example. I just kind of wanted to mention, this is a blog post by Hannah Morgan, the Career Sherpa. If you don't follow Hannah, great follow on LinkedIn and other places. But she's talking here in this post about kind of some of the professions that are sort of recession proof. And I just wanted to mention it because, even if you're not a firefighter or a hospice worker or a public utility worker, there's data that's needed around these operations. So that's things like operation managers, folks that might be doing, kind of like entry or mid-level tech work, database analyst, database administrator. I mean, if you're looking for roles like that and you have some experience doing some of those things that I just mentioned, these are places you can look to take those recession-proof skills potentially. So it's a good kind of extra tip. And yeah, I would say, definitely put this one in your resume, put it in positioning. In a second, I'll sort of show you an example. Another example would be remote and hybrid work communication. So this is just a reality right now. A lot of employers are not very good at this kind of thing. And so if you have some experience, right, maybe you've put together an Asana, a workflow or project management process. Maybe you put together, Google Docs that kind of like teach teams how to work together with tools or use different kinds of integrations. These are all things that you can put in your resume, right? You can highlight them so that you can talk about, oh yeah, well, we developed this, or we created this kind of process or structure to really make sure that people were able to work together, no matter whether they were in the office or at a coffee shop or at home, meeting virtually, meeting blended, things like that. So it's another kind of set of skills that you can highlight. And there's a few things that we'll drop in chat that I'll make sure that links are shared with you. But let's see, I think GitLab has a remote guide. Can't quite remember what it's called. Yeah, here you go. So this is just a quick example. GitLab has a guide to remote work. You might take a look at this and you can see how you might be able to kind of pull some of these, asynchronous communication. That might be a phrase that you put into your resume, you put into your applications, experience to asynchronous communication and using, tools like Slack, Asana, Microsoft Teams, whatever it might be to kind of communicate across time zones. High value skill during a recession, right? Because these teams are having to kind of make a lot with a little, and they're trying to use these tools efficiently. So that's another example. Here's just a very brief, not very fancy version of how your positioning might change. So there's 3 examples here. You got one about communication, you got one about data, and you've got one that's sort of, communication and data, right? A little bit. But putting those skills front and center can really put you in a good position for any opportunities that come up. It can also be a way for you to, potentially look at promotions or kind of working your way up through an org too. So just remember, there are opportunities to take these recession-proof types of skills and adjust your positioning to meet it. All right, so strategy number 2 is balancing push and pull. And another way to think about this is sort of like outbound versus inbound. Most people are really in this kind of like pull or inbound model, right? Where they're just sort of like, oh, well, I set up all these traditional kind of notifications. I'm getting job, links from LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, et cetera. That works for sure. But if you're just mostly focused on that, you're going to want to add other stuff as well in that realm. So just for example, and again, this link will be shared here. But there are, kind of niche job boards that you might want to be paying attention to, subscribing to, getting notifications from. Oh, and by the way, this post here from a few days ago has a ton of extra resources. So I'll share the link to that and you'll find some of it useful, hopefully. But here at the bottom, there's a couple of examples, 9 and 10, of specific kind of job boards. So I like this one, ethical tech job boards. That's cool. I'm interested, right? Something to kind of check out. And this sort of like a list of job boards, right? And so you probably are familiar with some of these, but maybe there's some things you don't know about, some listservs, some email newsletters, some specific niche kinds of things that you'd be pretty interested in. Like, for example, Code for America jobs. That's kind of like civic tech. It's a nice little niche. So, things like this where you can scan them regularly, click through, look once a week, every couple of weeks, check for opportunities. Another good way to do it. And then also this additional post, which I kind of posted up a while back, that has some of these specific remote work oriented jobs boards. So there's just a ton of stuff here that you can take a look at. And again, these links will be made available as well. So these are all sort of like setting up inbound, right? Notifications, emails, newsletters, letting yourself know what's what. And then one other tiny detail is, as I think a lot of people are used to now, you can add your resume or profile to databases. I would recommend not doing it to these huge ones where you really don't know how they're going to use that data, because they might be selling it, or scamming and spamming potential might be out there. But look for, if you're going to go that route, these more niche kind of databases. So like this is one for marketers called We Are Rosie. And you set up a profile, they send you opportunities. By the way, I've been in this community and occasionally receive alerts. I'm not job searching here, but at this time, but because I'm self-employed, but yeah, this one's pretty good. So look for the niche ones, right? And check the quality, and be careful about what kind of data or information you sort of put out there in the world. I think be a little more conservative about databases in general. So yeah, perfect. On the other side of the equation, you've got sort of the outbound work, right? A little more outreach, a little more networking. Informational interviews are really helpful to do. Not a lot of people really do that, but a 15-minute to a 20-minute informational interview where you're able to just reach out to people and say, I saw that you went from, working on a support team to doing QA engineering. Like, would you be open to a quick chat about that? Send them that LinkedIn DM, send them that email. I'm trying to make that same jump. If you're open to it, I think even just a few minutes would be really helpful, and I'd appreciate it. So, take those opportunities. Outreach to peers, hiring managers, recruiters. For sure, by peers, I especially mean other people in the job search. I think we sometimes think of the job search as this kind of like isolated thing where we're just on our own and good luck. You need support from people, right? You need to be there with people who can understand what it's like to get the rejection emails from those, post-interview, and they just know what it's like, right? To grind through the process of job searching. So I think that's important. And then I also want to talk a little bit about warming up your network, which kind of goes to the hiring manager's question. And then Diego Granados, who is a product manager at LinkedIn, who got a job through this strategy that I'm about to show you. He got a job with this sort of tip he's also shared. So let's look at that really quickly. And again, this is all like in that outbound, right? Outreach, a little extra work. Yeah, it's extra time and energy, but balancing your push and pull so that you're not just like applying to 600 jobs a month and that's it. You're just waiting for all that inbound to come in and it's exhausting. Balance your effort, right? Because in a recession economy or the down economy potentially, you're going to want to kind of have different at-bats and different inputs. So 2 things here. Let's see, Diego's template is down here. This is under outreach template section. Diego has a couple of templates. I'm just going to show you one really quickly, but he has a couple of templates about how to find opportunities and in particular, how to find hiring managers on LinkedIn, which is really kind of a brilliant strategy. And one of the things I like about this post, which I guess he did about a year ago, is he's very specific. He's like, don't search for this, search for this. And so he gives you some good keywords and phrases you can play with, and then you can filter it, which is cool, by the company if you want. And then he even gives you like, don't say this, say that. So he gives you really nice little templates, some good advice here. There's some good comments in here, so read through the comments because some other people, he kind of does Q&A answers what can happen as you're going through that process. I think this is a brilliant thing. You can find a hiring manager who just posted something yesterday or a week ago. Hey, I'm looking for people for this. Does anybody know? Oh my gosh, you might be that person, right? Do that quick outreach and bam, suddenly you're in the running. You've added another thing to your queue. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at that, incorporating that into your, at least a couple times a week on LinkedIn, because people post stuff all the time. And there's some other stuff here, like Ramit Sethi's scripts, which I think are really fantastic. This doc also has lots of info about how to kind of warm up your network. And so I'm not going to go into it in a deep way, but you've got like examples of direct outreach to your network. So this is like, hey folks, this is what I'm looking to do. This is a template that you can rewrite very easily. It's awesome. You've got cold outreach to hiring managers. You've got following up with hiring managers. You've got cold outreach to HR recruiters, someone in your network asking for context, outreach to a potential teammate in the future. Lots of templates here you can use. And one other thing I will say about this like process of kind of warming up your network and doing this outbound work, this kind of outreach, is to really use the power of small asks. And I talk about this a lot. I think that one of the things that people really don't pay a lot of attention to is, we forget that people are busy. Our attentions are fragmented by our phones. We got text messages, we got social media, we get emails, we're getting our work Slack pinging us. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? And so if you make the ask really small, you have a much higher potential of opening that door. And then you can build a relationship and have additional asks. And so just as an example, one of the things that we talked about last night, and Alyssa, who's one of our kind of co-moderators and leaders for Hours List, pointed it out, like, get consent first. Keep the ask really small. I love the way she described it. I wish I could repeat it, but just wanted to tip the hat to her sharing that. And basically the idea is this: you say like, hey, so-and-so, like, I noticed you're doing this, or you're in this role, or whatever, say something relevant. Would you be open to a quick question? I'm curious if you like the culture there. Bam. It's like I'm on the other end, I don't use LinkedIn, I'm tired, I'm bored. Oh, all right. Yeah, that's a good question. I could answer that. That's easy, right? So yeah, no, sure. Well, I do like the culture here, or, I like the culture, but it's got some problems, or, honestly, this place is kind of a toxic place, so you can get different kinds of answers to that. And then you say, oh, that's awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer. That helps me a lot because I'm in the job search and it's hard to read these things. So thank you. It means a lot. Yeah, no problem. That was easy. I'm happy to help. Yeah, as I'm kind of going through the process, would it be okay if I think of another quick question if I reach out in a week or two? Yeah, okay, cool. See what I did there? That was another small, respectful ask. So you're building trust, you're building a relationship. And yeah, of course, you're going to send, 10 emails and DMs, and you're going to hear back from 1 or 2 people. A lot of people are not going to respond to it. That's normal. So just, set your expectations. Don't take it personally. That's part of the deal. But go through and do that, right? And then guess what happens, right? If a few weeks later you see that job pop up and you apply for it, you can message it back and ask another question. Say, oh, I actually just applied, like, really excited. Would it be okay if I asked another quick question? Yeah, go for it. Okay. I was wondering, I noticed in the description it said this, like, does this team work with that team a lot? What's that like? Oh yeah, great question. Let me answer that for you. So you're warming up your network, you're warming up these relationships, you're adding things in a genuine, authentic way. And again, these are just templates to get you started, but that will hopefully, kind of remind you that networking is not as scary as it looks. And so there's a lot more in here. By the way, the bootcamp, we spend a whole week talking about this one. We do these weekly sessions, and then throughout the week in the group, LinkedIn group, DM, or chat, we actually talk about it and share examples and things like that. So that's a place where you can learn more about that if you're looking to open that door. Yeah, so let's talk about another strategy. Number 3 is look for riches in the niches, or the niche. Never quite sure how to pronounce that word. This is one that I definitely recommend that you pay attention to. So a lot of times people have a job, job role or title in mind. They're like, I want to be a marketer, or I want to be an engineer. And then you ask them, like, okay, very cool. That's exciting. What kind of marketing? What kind of engineering? And they don't really have an answer. And let me tell you, that communicates on the other side of the aisle too. When you apply to a job or you interview, they're like, well, what do you like about this role? What's interesting to you? Well, I want to be an engineer. Okay, tell me more. So being specific, but not too specific, is a really important part of the job search. And I think it's even more important right now in a down economy. So here's an example: Series B social impact startups that haven't laid anybody off in the last 6 months or 12 months. How does one actually find this particular niche? Well, thanks for asking. Shani Ben-Zur is, I think, the CMO over at Crunchbase, and provided a really lovely example. Again, we'll share the links to this stuff of exactly how to find that kind of vertical. And so you can actually go in, and she talks about like filtering. If you haven't used Crunchbase, it's a brilliant place to look up companies. And so she'll just walk you through it. I'm not going to, hammer it out, but you can actually pretty much find it. You can save a short list of companies. You can, make a target or a watch list. So if you do want to go in and create this type of, Series B or Series C, whatever it is, you can make that list pretty easily with Crunchbase. And by the way, not everybody's sort of super into startup parlance. So one of the questions that came up in the chat was, what about Series D, Series C? If you're not familiar with like startup and funding, so venture-backed companies are companies where you have people putting money in to grow companies pretty quickly. And so this is a very short primer on it, just from my experience, having worked a lot in early and mid-stage startups. Sort of preceding seed, you might have like 500,000, a million. Sometimes seed actually goes up to a few million. It depends kind of on a lot of mechanics of the economy and venture capital and things like that. And, FOMO and power of envy and all that. But in general, that's a pretty legit thing. Then you get to series A, B, and C. You're looking at like, 5 million, 8 million, 10 million, 15 million. D and E is like up there towards like 50, 80 million, whatever. And by the way, when you get up there, then you're talking about like institutional investors. So these private equity funds that, invest $80 million in a company that already has, $60 million a year in revenue, and they're betting that it could become a unicorn, billion-dollar company. And you also get kind of this trajectory of employee size there as well. So usually around pre-seed and seed, you're talking about a handful of people, like, 3, 5, 12, 15. You get to series A, B, and C, you're talking about 15, 20, 25, 30, 50. And then, you get to like 75, 150, 300 as you get kind of deeper into that stack. And so those are all things that you could, create target lists on based on what your kind of personal preferences are. And if you don't know, you can use it to explore and discover too. So those are some ways you can target, startups in that case. You can also, kind of do the same thing in terms of, targeting public companies. So I didn't get super deep into it here, but you can use Yahoo Finance's public company earnings tool. So you can see public companies. You can tune into their earnings calls and read their transcripts to see how they're doing. I know that doesn't sound that exciting, and you probably don't want to spend like hours doing that, but you might make a target list of companies that are in retail, if that's a place you're interested in. Maybe you want to work for a bigger company, or a set of public companies that are in, I don't know, let's say cybersecurity, right? So you're looking for cybersecurity, Fortune 500, or at least, a public company above a certain size of revenue, which you can check in, these different kinds of databases. And then, you get a short list of 15 or so, then, check out their earnings calls, transcripts, check out their SEC filings, and ask yourself questions like, what part of the product is doing really well, right? Because, if it's Cisco, just as an example, you might be interested in a role at Cisco that is a part of the company that's like forward, right? They're making the most money on that product. That'll be in that data. Versus like, yeah, that's a legacy part of the product that could be at risk of layoffs. I don't think I'm going to apply to any jobs in that business unit. Things like that can help you really narrow and refine the niche that you go after, or the multiple niches that you kind of go after. And then one other thing here that I wanted to mention too is I think people forget that Google Alerts can be quite powerful if you customize it to a deep level. So just as a very small example, if you've ever been to the library way back in the day, or you still go to the library and use the Boolean search in their catalog, you can use modifiers like and or. Here we go, we'll add one there. So let's say you are someone who likes mindfulness and you think that meditation apps like Calm or Headspace are cool. And you're like, wow, that would be cool. I'd love to work for a company like that. I wonder if they have any, design roles or support or ops roles. You can set up a Google alert with this type of query to send you, any kind of new news that pops up or stories that come up. And so here's just a very small example. Of course, Headspace is mentioned here, but hey, here's one I've never even heard of. And Calm for Business is another one. Smiling Mind, this is Australia based, and it's cool because they look like they kind of target small businesses specifically. So, all right, I wonder if they have any jobs. I don't see a careers page here, but could be something to peek at. Anyway, this could be a small company. I don't know how big an app they run, but outside of that, make sure you're using Google Alerts. In general, it's one of those things where it's like targeting a little bit, but not too much. Just expand it, right? If you just did this, you get a lot of results, maybe too much, right? So add another keyword. But if you are too specific, it's like 6 or 8 or 10 words long, you might not get many results back. So it's a process of elimination, but other words you can look for, like new partnership, or just partnership, launch, product launch, industry name, style of company, things like that. You can play with the word kind of orientation there and test it out, right? Because you can do the search yourself to see what comes up in the regular and the news results. So yeah, make sure you're using Google Alerts to its full power because it can be quite useful. So strategy number 4 is kind of a little bit of a reminder of that, kind of warming up your network. Is just keep the fires warm, right? So I talked a little bit about the power of small asks to kind of give and get. And I also remind people, I'm like, if your peers right now are job seekers, they're a peer group that you have in addition to your industry and role and mentors and things like that. Like, take the time twice a day to find a cool looking job and tag someone or send it to someone, right? Give a little bit. That's something that could take you, I bet you could find 2 jobs in 15 minutes that are relevant to somebody that you've talked to who's in the job search process as well. And if you make sure that, they know what you're looking for right down here, keep them updated. Like, hey, would it be okay if I gave you a quick update? I've just changed my search a little bit. And, any help keeping an eye out for ops is great. So you give a little, you get a little, right? It's kind of crowdfunding, but for your job search. And I think especially in, a down economy, having other people look out for you and you looking out for them is going to make sure you don't miss things, right? So that you're not dependent just on the kind of your individual outreach. You're trying to create relationships where people are feeling good. So maintain that. Last but not least, strategy number 5, let's talk about how to create a repeatable job search. This is something we know a lot about at Albert's List. I'm going to give you a very quick peek again at that bootcamp to give you a sense of how you can structure your job search in a way that is actually repeatable. But I wanted to mention really quickly that it's really about creating stages with clear conversion points. So again, we'll share this template with you. And you don't have to look at all this right now and kind of memorize it, but make sure that in your stages you're really clear and you're moving opportunities through the stages so that you're looking for jobs in all of these places, you're getting your alerts and things like that, and then you're putting the ones that you want in your job tracker, which we'll show you a template for in a second. So once you've decided that they're worth it, label them as apply to. I'm going to apply to these roles, right? And maybe as you're preparing to apply, you also have a stage that's like research. I'm checking them out to make sure they're legit. There's a whole bunch of screening advice in here that I won't go into, but yeah, quickly scan these things and look for red flags and green flags, things that you feel good about. And then, at the end of that stage, you're like, okay, I think I've screened it and I'm ready to apply to it now. Time to actually get in there. So stage 3, your conversion point is hitting the submit button, emailing the materials, actually applying. So very clear conversion point. And you got interview prep and things like that, which can be multiple because you've got recruiter screens versus full hiring manager, panel interviews, things like that. But again, you've got a nice clear conversion point. And so this staging, it's not like you have to use this exact staging. You can copy this doc and make a template out of it. If you, by the way, if you haven't done that before, this is a Google Doc, just go to make a copy, make your own copy and delete anything you don't like and edit it as needed, and then just work that process so your stages are good. But again, it's going to help you create clear conversion points, which allows you to keep looking at your process and updating. And then also use a job tracker. That's another thing that we mentioned. I don't know if you've done anything like this before. I mean, you probably used a spreadsheet or a doc in some way. I personally like this model that Selena Mendoza created. Selena's a product leader. She's awesome, super visionary, really cool person who's been in the Albert's List community for a long time. Follow her on LinkedIn and Twitter. She's just great. I'm just telling you, she's awesome for that reason. But she does, she breaks this down in detail. It's not like you have to go into all of this detail in a deep way. But she really creates this kind of process where you can put these jobs in here and you can label them and move them through your stages, right? So that you can quickly and easily see what you're dealing with. And, one of the questions that came up in the chat too was like, oh, this seems like a lot of work. Do I really want to do this? Well, let me give you an example of why it matters. And this is something that you could do in an hour. Maybe it might take you 2 hours. It might take you a whole afternoon or a whole morning. I don't know. It depends on how detailed you do want to get. Maybe you don't need 15 stages. You just need interested, applied, interviewing, right? So your tags, labels, et cetera, could be simple. You just delete a bunch of stuff on the template that Selena created for you. But you get a rejection email at 2 p.m. and then you've got an interview coming up at 2:30 p.m. and you're kind of freaking out because we all get those rejection notices and it can be tough. Let's be real. But having your job, okay, oh my gosh, I have this interview. What kind of interview is it? Oh my gosh, who is it with? Having your job search structure where you can quickly go to I'm gonna hit that tag that says interviews because it's an interview process. I'm gonna open it up. I'm gonna look at the notes. Okay, the hiring manager is this. I scan their LinkedIn. These are a few notes on them. These are the team that works with the role. These are some of the key points from the job description. Click open the job description, refresh yourself. Okay, for positioning, I need to do this, this, and this. The reason I'm sharing this example is that context switching is one of the hardest parts of a job search, right? You're like trying to manage a lot of stuff all at once. A job tracker helps you switch contexts faster. Have you ever tried to switch contexts and you couldn't do it? And it took you an extra 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, because you're like, fuck, I can't get this figured out. I'm stressed. I'm trying to deal with this. I'm trying to clear my emails. All I'm saying is a job tracker is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of mental energy, and it's going to position you and place you in the right place to do the right things at the right time. So is it an investment you should make? Only you can decide that. But, if I'm going to burn an afternoon, I think an afternoon to create a pretty good job tracker is not a bad way to go. So that's my advice, is take that time, make that investment in yourself to organize your search like that. All right, so let's talk just a little bit about the 8 weeks to employ bootcamp model. I actually recommend this model, whether you're taking bootcamp or not, but I'm going to be honest with you, about 35% of people that take this bootcamp get a job offer and sign that offer, or they get multiple job offers and they have to figure that out within 8 weeks. No lie, 35% of people, pretty much every time we do the bootcamp, that happens. People are at different positions, right? If you don't really know what job titles, careers, roles, et cetera, it can take a little bit longer to do some of that, but this process works. And we go through this, this process where we're like positioning yourself, your roles and your goals, getting your fundamentals in place, your application materials, things like that. Networking, which we kind of talked about on this webinar, but we really dig in deeper on the bootcamp. Interviewing and interview prep, which again is a little bit of a positioning challenge in a lot of ways. We also talk about kind of like navigating change as you get further into the job search. You need to prepare, to match yourself to the position and be prepared to kind of be thinking like you're already in the role, because creating that relationship with the hiring manager and the folks around it is going to help you. We also talk about credibility. And then, of course, offer letters, negotiating benefits, salary, things like that. Lots of nuts and bolts things. And in general, what I would share with you is that, this whole 8-week model is really useful for a variety of job seekers. If you're just kind of warming yourself back up and getting on the market, it can be quite helpful. You'll know some of this, but you'll be able to speed that process up quite a bit. There may be some new things in there that you've never seen. There often are. And honestly, people who really do the 8 weeks and hammer it in and focus and take it to heart and use all the templates and they kind of do all the homework and get in, they get job offers. It's just what happens, right? So I think it's a pretty great model, and it's something that we really recommend that, you take that same model in your job search. We'd love to have you in the bootcamp. It starts September 19th, which is a Monday, and we run it. It's after work hours. So it's 6 p.m. Pacific. It's a little bit later if you're happening in one of the other time zones, but it's available to folks who are working that way. You may be trying to get out of the current job you're in or level up, as well as folks who are just job searching kind of as their full-time job. So yeah, those are your takeaways. Hopefully that's helpful. We answered a bunch of questions. Tried to cover all the Q&A that popped up in the chat. We'd love to have you for the bootcamp. I'll share the link for that as well. That's this one, and you'll get that. And if you have any questions about the bootcamp, about this presentation, we'd love to hear it. Elisa and I are really passionate about getting job seekers in there. And I always tell people, I'm like, look, one of the reasons we run the bootcamp and we do these webinars is because we're here to give 200%. And we do that because we know what it means when someone gets a job where they're valued, they're respected, they're paid, and it's a better opportunity, right? I mean, there's not a better feeling in the world than knowing that we're in your corner and we're reinforcing you. And so we're really serious about it. And this bootcamp's packed with that value. These webinars that we do are packed with that value for that reason as well. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to bop it back up to the title slide. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. Hopefully you caught some skills. Go back and rewatch it, hit pause, think about it, make some notes about how you can put some of this into play as soon as possible, get your job tracker rolling, get your stages rolling. And then last but not least, I just want to leave you with something that I usually actually start with, which is make sure to take care of yourself. Make sure you got resources and supports, because the job search is hard. We know it. We've been there. We've watched people go through it many times, as well as going through it ourselves. So take care of yourself, get those daily walks in, do the meditation app, make notes in your journal, go see your therapist regularly, get a coach, talk to other job searchers, create a group of job searching peers that you check in with for accountability. Do the boot camp if that helps you to have that model where we really dig in. Whatever it is, don't do it alone. Don't be isolated. You definitely deserve to have a community around you that helps you get through it. So that's it. How to recession-proof your job search in 2022. Would love to hear any questions and follow up. Y'all are awesome. Please take good care of yourself, and we will see you soon.